engagement range is
Mm.
one thing that I wanted to get your opinion, because I know that you're kind of a capital ship nut, um,
On the quiet,
and
yeah.
and I had some interesting thoughts about how this could work. Want to get your feedback, see if you had anything to add. And I kind of wanted to start small because, again, capital ships is a topic that you and I could rant for hours.
Mm.
But in the interest of brevity, I wanted to try and focus on the smaller corvettes. So, Hammerhead. I know that Perseus is technically a frigate, but we'll throw that in there. Potentially the Polaris. What do you think about that?
Sure.
Okay.
So engagement range, keeping it to that. Yeah, we're talking smaller. Basically, the elephant in the room is obvious. They reduced the engagement ranges to a pitiful 1,500 meters at the moment on the Hammerhead. That needs to change. That has to change at some point. Otherwise, this whole thing is going to fall through. But I believe that basically what little they do know about naval combat basically means they're going to be doing one of two things. They're either going to be trying to emulate the battleships of World War II and that era, whereby they're going to be basically launching shells over a significant range. This adds a lot of manual stuff to it because I think a lot of the actual firing control computers, they're just going to completely fail to implement properly, I think. But there is a chance for something really cool, and I'll come back to what that is in a second because it's the case for both of these. Alternatively, what they do, if they're not emulating World War II era naval stuff, what they'll be doing is they'll be doing stuff from what is referred to as the missile age, like the Cold War. Stuff like that, where people realize that actually lobbing a shell and leaving gravity and physics to do the rest and wind speed and all that is a lot less efficient than just sending something that you can literally guide straight into your opponent and give it a custom munitions package to boot. So that is one of the two ways they can mix it. They can match it however they like. But in both scenarios, it's basically the engagement range needs to go way up.
Okay.
Because you're either lobbing these shells over such great distances, or you're lobbing the missiles over such great distances. Otherwise, if you try to have your cake and eat it, in I want it to be close range, but I also want to have missiles, but I also want to have big guns, but I also don't want people engaging. Otherwise you dip into Age of Sail territory where basically everyone's trying to pull up their ship right alongside one another. So basically there is something really cool they could do with the engagement range, particularly with shells. If that is something they want to do, they seem to outfit it with their ships with the missile is kind of like a subsystem, whereas the main armament is the guns and turrets. Using planetary gravity and stuff like that to send shells over a long period, wrapping around. I don't know if you've seen The Expanse. You have the slingshot races and stuff like that. Yeah, so you could have something where if someone's on the other side of a planet, you could send a shell and it enters that planet's orbit, and it could happen that way.
As cool as that sounds, I'm going to say there's a negative billion chance out of one that that's going to happen, and the reason why is we don't even have proper inertia for missiles. We don't have proper
Yep.
inertia for projectiles. They spawn when you click the button. They spawn at that point in space and time, and they go from there.
Yeah.
So, again, I would love Newtonian projectile shit. I don't see that happening. I think
Exactly.
we're going to get stuck with. It's really hard to tell because based on the data that we have, and again, there's not much out there for capital ships. The size 7 weapons have a range anywhere from 2,700 meters, potentially out to 5K. Of course, I couldn't find any hard figures on the Javelin, but in Xenothreat, it looks like it's engaging at 5 to 6 kilometers.
Yeah.
So, and then we have the Idris. That at some point in time, someone published some figures that showed that the size 10 railgun had a 40-kilometer range.
Yeah, I remember that.
So, I mean, I think I think that's kind of why I want to focus on the smaller ships and work up, because we could come up with some really cool shit for larger ships, but I don't think it would translate well to the smaller ones based on what they've done to weapons and weapon sight.
Yeah.
And actually, not just that. Like, think about it too. Closing distance and time to intercept or time to merge, however you want to put it. Like back in World War II, if that's the way, they always say, oh, it's a World War II model. Well, World War II ships could fire 25 miles.
Yeah.
They
exactly.
moved like 6 meters a second. So, and now we have ships that can go 1,000 meters a second, which is faster than some of the guns we have in game. I understand that they're the speeds are gonna bring them down, but let's even say it goes down to 100 meters a second. Approaching a stationary target at 100 meters a second at 5 kilometers. That's not much. That's not much time.
Well, we do have these new
seconds.
master modes. I know, we do have these new master modes, which I suppose is probably going to help curtail that. But yes, you're right. Don't get me wrong. The whole spiel I gave just then was me like a small boy standing in front of Buckingham Palace, wondering, wow, wonder what the royal family's like. Full wishy thinking,
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, basically, they need to choose which weaponry is like their measuring stick, if you like, and then use that as their right, this is how things are going to be done. Because part of the problem with the weapon engagement stuff, aside from being the fire control computers being woefully inadequate for the game, it's also the radar and detection gameplay, right?
Right.
Because it's not all about see target, shoot target. Because again, that's leading more towards Age of Sail. You've got to pick stuff up on radar. You've got your E-War as well. When there's a game that does this really, really well, and I think CIG could learn a lot. But at the same time, it could devolve into a lot of beyond visual range missile combat, which I know they don't know a lot about at all. Nebulous Fleet Command. I would definitely recommend anyone interested in what a glimpse of proper naval space combat could look like. Pop in there. It's not first person, but everything else, spot on.
Yeah, I actually picked that game up. It's fun as hell, but it's complicated and frustrating. But that should be what fleet combat is in Star Citizen.
Yes, exactly. But what are we going to do with the solo javelin captains, man? How are they going to?
Oh Jesus! Let's not dive into Spectrum. I'm staying clear of Spectrum talk. Okay.
Yeah, let's keep clear of the appropriately named forum. And
let's start focusing here on the Hammerhead. Again, I know the Hammerhead is not necessarily a capital ship. The whole point is it's I would classify it as a corvette. Star Citizen classifies it as a heavy gunship. I'm pretty sure at some point in time it was actually a corvette, and they keep changing their classification system because they don't know what they want to name things. But
no,
I actually shared my screen just a second ago, and I have the gunnery engagement range, and I've got a bunch of ships laid out in this thing. But essentially, right now, all light fighters and medium fighters have a range of just a little less than 1,500 meters, which matches the Hammerhead. Now, we have the Ares series, which has 2,700 meter range. And actually, I did not know this. The Vanguard has a range of 2,800 meters.
Yes, because it has access to that size 5 mount, doesn't it?
So we have a size 5 gun that outranges a size 7. But without getting into that, we have a situation where the Hammerhead, the ship designed to take out fighters, is almost at a double its range disadvantage against fighters.
Yeah.
So
this is a major dropping of the ball, if you like. I get that it's a game in development, but CIG basically said, yeah, we're going to homogenize everything to make it easier. And that was how many patches ago now? 3, 4 maybe? They've just forgotten about it. And so the Hammerhead now is in a position where it can't actually do its job. There are ways of fixing this, but I don't know if CIG will consider them at all. Who knows what they're cooking up there in the fucking crazy chocolate factory.
What do you think is, if you could fix it in one way, what would you do to put the Hammerhead back on point?
I would overhaul the weapon system. And I'm talking about the weapon system for the whole game, not just the Hammerhead, so that The type, this is going to be different for energy and ballistic, but the weapon, the type of ship that it is attached to determines some of its key performance statistics. So, for example, an example you brought up just then, the Vanguard, right? That has a size 5, and almost all the time, people are always going to take the size 4 gimbal mount. Obviously, the Hammerhead also takes size 4. The Vanguard has a much smaller power plant, and so it should be able to have a size 4, yes, but maybe at greatly reduced range or something like that. Whereas a Hammerhead has this stonking great, almost capital class power plant. It should be able to send those shots further down range.
So we're talking specifically about laser weaponry currently.
At this moment in time, yes.
Okay.
Ballistics would have to be something different, and even then, the whole ballistic system is a mess as well, because ballistic ammo counts are tied to the gun itself and not the ship that it's on. There's no capacity for like reloading or storing ammo. If a Hammerhead takes a size 4 ballistic repeater and that same repeater is on the Vanguard, they both have to spend the money and go back to the station at the same time. There's no long range potential for the Hammerhead to stay out there with its ballistics. Right. So if you change that, if you change the weapon's capability based on the capability of the ship and not just this isolated thing that you kind of duct tape to the side of your thing, yep, it's good as new. You actually start seeing some really good dynamicism. I guess that's the word. I don't know if that is a word.
It's too early. We're not going to argue.
We're not going to argue. Cool. Yeah, you'll see combat be a lot more dynamic, and also your ship choice will matter as well. It also stops really stupid scenarios because the Vanguard is the wonder ship for like Babby's my first. Oh my god, it does everything, and it has the size 5 gun, and the coffee line and the turret and everything. Oh my god. And so it stops the Vanguard from somehow being a challenge to something like a Hammerhead, when really it shouldn't be. It should take a lot of a couple of them working very, very tightly to take it out. Like
a wing of them going like a wing of Harbingers against a Hammerhead.
Exactly.
I mean, okay, but yeah, a single one shouldn't be able to inflict the kind of damage it can currently at range. My thought was that they actually change weapon ranges and restrictions for all ships in the game. So, like you said, like redesigning the weapon system for the game, but for example, light fighters would be limited to size 1s and 2s. Mediums would be 1, 2s, and 3s. Heavy fighters would be 2, 3s, and 4s. Corvettes would be like 4s and 5s. And then,
generally speaking, yeah.
And then that way, you could hard cap the ranges. But that brings up the issue as well. What about all those Buccaneer pilots who bought the thing because you could strap a size 4 to it?
Exactly my point.
So, no, I like that better, and I like the fact that you could say that the ammunition range for the lasers is affected, and maybe even the total power output. In fact, you could even make the argument that even for the Hammerhead, I mean, that thing has, 24 guns?
I believe so,
yeah,
yes.
So 24 guns. You are incentivized to split the loadout, because the more laser weaponry that you have on it, the less potential range, and also the less damage output.
The more dependent you are on your power drive, on your power plant.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that would incentivize people to bring in ballistics as well. So I think that is actually a really good idea. I'm glad you brought that up, because I hadn't thought of that.
It also brings up another thing, and it's kind of where I guess there could be some balance issues because of like how alarming this is. You'll know this because I've played War Thunder with you. Mm-hmm. But of course, if ballistics are stored aboard a ship, they're stored in a magazine, which gives way to magazine explosions, which is part of naval combat. So again, it feeds into it. The stuff's already there. They just need to copy. It's just it's all downhill from once you see what the source material is, it's quite obvious.
Yeah, and then, we had the recent glimpse of the Hammerhead. They're doing that relay gameplay, but the one thing they haven't mentioned is any type of ammo port. And I feel like that's a huge miss, because one of the things that I would assume a ship the size of the Hammerhead would have is his own magazine per gun. Yeah, or it has an auto feeder, like, built into the wall that pushes out to the gun.
Yeah.
So even if they wanted to make it so that you had to expend the magazine, so you know how the turrets actually detach and push out?
Yes.
You have to take out that ammo. Once that's done, you have to recouple with the ship. It reloads the guns, and then you push back out. If they wanted to do something like that, I feel like that would be a decent compromise. Because you still have the ability to reload, and it's not just auto feed to where you're just constantly out there until, the poor bastard running around with an ammo box gets tired on your ship.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm seriously worried that ballistics are screwed. Based on what we've seen.
Exactly. Until we start giving ballistics or even just the different damage types some serious thought, they're not going to be able to tackle this properly. And right now, I fully get, in the current state of the game, it's probably not going to be a priority for some time. But yeah, it's like another example to bring this in. I've taken out obviously hammerheads various times, fully crewed for various Org events and stuff like that. We've got this sodding great cargo bay at the back. Fill it with ammo boxes. But no, it's just not used. I'm going to put my tumbril there for when I go for a joyride after my victory. It's like, it just doesn't happen, does it? Come on, it's a warship. Treat it like a warship.
Right. Yep. It should be a massive weak point on the ship too. Hey, instead of trying to aim for the power plants, behind that top turret, let's aim for the cargo bay, because that's where they keep all their weapon, their missile reloads and their ammo reloads.
Yep.
Yeah. It's and again, I don't really want to dive into time to kill or time to disable or any of that stuff. There's too many unknowns when it comes to armor and all that other crap to get into that. That's why, like I said, I want to focus on engagement range, but that is definitely something that should go into that time to kill conversation. Because I think they're pigeonholing themselves to where, even though they come out and say, hey, we want to make the combat fun and engaging, it's like the way you've set it up, I don't see how the larger ship combat currently is going to go that way.
Well, exactly. Yeah, what they've done is their system, while very good on paper to start the project with, it's literally makes a case of what's the biggest hard point my ship can take, and that determines your combat efficacy.
But then they came back and actually shot that in the face when they nerfed the Ares. And again, I'm sure there's a bunch of people rolling their eyes. Oh God, they're talking about the Ares. Well,
oh no, not the Ion.
Right, but and we understand that some people got pissed off because they went in a straight frickin' line and they got blown up. I mean, cannons in general are not combat viable, especially in space. And people were bitching about the slow bolt traveling 3 kilometers to hit them. Oh, I got one tapped. Well, no shit. It's a big gun. And that's my favorite ship concept for combat in the game currently is the Perseus. And that has me extremely worried for the Perseus. Because if they're going to bitch about CIG, don't put a fucking size 7 gun on a ship and expect it not to break things, or a heavy fighter.
Yeah.
What happens when I'm in my Perseus and my slow-ass guns manage to get a shot on a stationary target? Are we going to hear from the Arrow pilots and the Hornet pilots, oh God, why did I just die? If I hit you with that shot, that took some skill to pull off. Or at the very least, it took some frickin' luck. I should decimate your ship.
Yeah, it's a case of basically, because every time they introduce a newer, bigger weapon, as they did with the Ares, you're effectively, at least in terms of the isolated microcosm of Star Citizen, you are advancing the arms race, right?
Right.
And so, people are going to be upset. Unfortunately, I don't know what it is about Star Citizen that seems to, like, you would think that the type of game that it is, being like, an alpha project and all this talk about scams and stuff, that it would have a pretty good filter for people coming in. But it seems as though those that manage to make it past that filter are some of the most spectacular window lickers you will ever see in your life. And you can't even tell if it's trolling. It's like perfect horseshoe theory. But so they will whinge about anything, literally anything. Well, I'm not going to bring any of the topics up here because it's
Right.
not really relevant. But
Otherwise,
yeah,
we're going to be here for hours.
Exactly, on the wrong topic, no less. But yeah, basically, you can't introduce a new ship like this. When this Perseus comes out, you can have people whining about those size 7 guns as well. Oh my god, I've been one tapped. So like, well, yeah, you were sitting still, sipping coffee in a outside of Armistice. What are you doing? But the concept of risk assessment doesn't exist to these people, of course.
Right. Sorry, I got us a little off track because I was staring at my Perseus, and I just want the damn ship. Let's wrap up with the Hammerhead real quick when it comes to engagement range. So right now it's limited to 1,500 meters.
Yeah, it's still very much the daddy in that scenario. But if you bring enough fighters and you play your cards right, you don't just launch fighters at it. Because this isn't Star Wars. You can't just take a single X-wing and just ode everything. I'm really sorry to tell you, it's just not how it works. Yeah, about 4,500 at the moment, based on the current state of the game. Obviously, if things change, maybe increasing it like that. We're just talking about the turrets, right?
Right.
Its range for things like missiles, I feel, should be greater. But
yes.
I gather that we're not talking about missiles.
No, missiles is its own 16-hour conversation. Because there's just so much that needs to be updated for missile gameplay. We're specifically talking about gunnery range. Now, when you say 4,500 meters, is that the full laser loadout or the max distance for like the ballistic loadout?
So I feel like it should be about the same for both. I mean, I think ballistics maybe could warrant going on a little bit further because, as opposed to an energy projectile that will fizzle out after a time, the ballistic round will continue to go, but maybe it could just lose velocity, and we have to think about a mechanic that we don't actually have in at the moment, penetration. There comes a point where it's just not going to pen. So yeah, it will keep going, and you'll probably mildly inconvenience the pilot, but it's not going to do anything. So it's at least there.
Instead of, I mean, until armor comes in the game, which we're assuming that'll come in, before the coming of the next savior here. Let's say, instead of pen, let's call it damage fall off. After 4,500 meters, you might get another 200 or 300 meters, but you're basically just making the guy ship bricks. It's not really going to do any serious damage to.
Yes, like for the current damage model, you could even call it like a percentage reduction over X number of meters until finally it is literally just a fuck it, for the purposes of balance, because obviously this isn't how it would really happen in space. But for the purposes of balance, yeah, it just basically peters out after a while, becomes kind of ineffective.
Right. No, that actually makes sense. And then, so I would say, let's say 4,500 for lasers, a full laser ship, and then 4,800 with a 300 meter damage fall off for ballistics. I feel like that sounds
48, 49,
reasonable.
Yeah, 48, 49. Maybe pushing. I mean, it depends on the thing. Maybe you could have cannons go further. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, and see, that's the other thing. They have cannons going shorter distances than repeaters, which whatever. This is the based on that model. Let's just round up to an even 5,000, saying that's the absolute maximum range of any of the size 4 guns on the Hammerhead.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like we had said earlier, for the Vanguard, sure, you could throw a size 5 on there and get 6,000 meters of range, but you're gonna have one shot.
Yeah, you're going to have a very, very low ammo count. We're talking like, I mean, I don't know what the actual ammo count is, but A10, right?
Right. I mean, I think it's way high. Hold on, we're gonna go out on a limb here. We're gonna check Urkel and see how overpowered the Vanguard size 5 ammo count is.
It's the same as every other size 5 ammo count. That's the beauty of the current model.
I can't remember. Well, for the specifically for the the laser cannon. That was Aegis, right?
Yep, Aegis Vanguard, yeah.
And then let's just go light strike. So they have 14. Yeah, they have 14 ammo for the laser, which is way too high. I mean, it should seriously be like 4.
Yeah, once you get to size 5, like I would even be as generous as to say maybe 8 or 9. But then obviously, again, this is where capacitors, like it seems to be at the moment, capacitors just load a shot at the same speed regardless. So if it's a massive gun, it charges slower.
Well, it should be a mixture of charging slower and then you overheat like a motherfucker because those coolers were not necessarily designed to take on a weapon that large. So you just turn into a giant infrared beacon. So we're talking Ares and Perseus, Nautilus. I think it's got some size 7s on the Javelin as well. When we're talking,
yeah, I think the Javelin is a battery of size 7 or size 8 port and starboard.
Yeah, if I remember correct, and again, the Matrix of Lies hasn't been updated in a bit, but the two sets of guns on either broadside should be twin size 7s. Originally, I was under the impression these were size 7 ballistic cannons. In game, I think they're lasers currently, but whatever. Either way.
I'm pretty sure they're ballistics. You can see various. I think it's the threat was the event, the footage.
Okay.
You can.
So it's the big uns, the quad size 9s that it's got. Those are the lasers. Okay. So either way, so those are the ships that we know of currently that have size 7 weapons. And right now, it's focusing on the Perseus. We know that the Perseus is going to be slow, heavily armored. The turrets are going to move like trash, but it's supposed to have a lot of punching power. Yep. And the rounds are supposed to be, what's the word? They're supposed to have multiple ammo types: flak, armor piercing, HE, maybe incendiary, things like that. But for the Perseus itself, if you think of like a gunboat that's meant to punch up, at what range is this thing going to be engaging? Because if you think about it, its range against cargo ships, that doesn't really matter. Who gives a shit? They're not going to be able to take this thing on, even in a convoy. It would just be fair game. But if we're talking about a wolf pack of Perseus going up against something larger than that, well, then you're talking about the Perseus going up against Polaris and Idris, and potentially a squad of them going up against Javelins.
Yep.
So these things are going to have to really reach out and touch someone if they're going to even be anywhere useful at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Let me see if I can pull up the video. This is something I wanted to show you just to give you a frame of. So when we're talking about engaging at this distance, like you already said, one of the biggest weaknesses of the game is the frickin' calculator for the firing solution. At, I would say, 800, 900 meters, it basically, against smaller ships, it's basically useless.
Yeah.
You have to kind of eyeball it. But here's, I don't know, can you see my screen with the video?
I can.
Okay. So what I did is I found an 890 jump, which has a similar profile to an Idris. So assume this is Idris size. You have a Perseus that's probably going to be a little bit slimmer, not as long. But
yeah, it's kind of the best thing we have right now to represent what that would be.
Exactly. So this is the view. This is what the sight picture is at its max profile at 1,000 meters. So as we back up, this is 2,000.
Yep.
This is 3,000. So right now, if we assume that the range of size 7 cannons is 5 kilometers about, based on what we've seen the Javelin AI do, this is still a pretty freaking big target.
Yeah.
Considering we're 5 kilometers out. I almost feel like, in order for size 7s to really be effective, at the very least, they should be able to be used as far as your visual range allows.
Yeah.
Which for the 890 is about 12 kilometers. I mean, that picture, like my speed chevron, perfectly encompasses the 890 at this distance, but the fact that I can still see it, like this should be, if they are going to give it a maximum range, this should be the smallest maximum range they give these guns. I personally don't think this is far enough, especially with how fast we can close distances between two ships. And keep in mind, I'm not saying that the maximum range should be the effective range. I think the effect of your maximum, 50% of your maximum.
Yeah, that much is in the game, I can tell you that.
Right.
if you're shooting at targets of 1,500 meters, and at the moment you're an idiot. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, I mean, with the Hornet, I'm trying to use ballistics. I'm like 300 meters away before I unload. Otherwise, I'm not hitting anything.
Yeah, exactly.
But either way, I think to make to make capital ship gameplay, because it's not just about, am I combat effective? It has to be fun. It has to be engaging. It would be nice to be semi-cinematic. So as I'm approaching my target, their captain is watching shells fly over their ship, or laser bolts fly over their ship as I miss because of the distance. But the option to be able to get a critical hit, or do damage to the shields before the merge, I feel like that would be very important in larger scale combat like this.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on the range of size 7 guns?
So to bring it back to the size 7 guns, I'm in agreement. Basically, if you want my like rough estimate of figures based on what I'm seeing here, maybe about 11.5 to 12 for las and 1300 ish, like your effective before drop off range for ballistics.
Okay.
With something like a Perseus, because that was the whole like central thing. Obviously, I would recommend with that again, get your proper E-War, get radar, because if you see a radar pip, you can't with these big ships. This is the thing with naval combat. You can't just rely on visual range alone.
Right.
Not only does stuff moves faster than naval, so that only really just emphasizes my point. If you see a contact burning towards you on the radar, but you can't see it, but you can see that it's heading towards you. It's on a consistent course, bearing, and speed straight for you. You set general courses, you set action stations, you get people in turrets, because the ship is quite possibly under threat. If you can see them, they can see you, and it is already too late because everyone's too busy eating and doing whatever, and people can't just sit in turrets for their entire gameplay session. They don't go to work for X number of hours to finally get on Star Citizen and sit in a turret for the 2-3 hours in the evening they have for gameplay, right?
Right.
So you need to break it up.
Okay. So, again, missile gameplay will be a separate conversation, but that would help for BVR engagements, obviously. But it would be nice, to your point, to be able to engage with your cannons. Maybe not effectively, but at the very least, throw some warning shots downrange if you needed to.
Yeah, exactly. And if you get lucky, then hooray, you score a big hit, maybe.
Right, but the Nautilus, I don't really see that as being a frontline combat ship. I mean, that's more of, I was laying mines and someone jumped me and I made them think twice. That thing's not really a combat vessel. The Perseus and the Javelin are really, that's where the size 7 guns are. The Perseus, obviously, those are its main armament. The Javelin, it's its secondary armament, but there's still 6 of the damn things per side. So the hope is that they're semi-effective.
It's still the main armament. It's just not the biggest gun it has,
right?
Because that's still part of its main battery. The whole thing they had when they designed that was, I want a sodding great broadside. Bottom text. That was it. Like, bring me the broadside, and it was good and it was done.
Yep. I mean, the only other thing that I think we can talk about then, because we've kind of talked about the estimate for lasers being 11.5 kilometers, ballistics 13. The Ares, so this is one of the, and again, I know this isn't a capital ship because of that stupid size 7 gun on it.
But it counts. It's in that. Yeah.
Right. Because it's a threat specifically designed for these smaller capital ships. I would almost say that. So your solution with the range and damage being tied to the capacitor is a good. I think another thing that they could do for the Ion is do a charge bolt. If you hold the trigger, you charge your shot to full power, and it actually has the potential to do some serious damage with less total shots available. Because I'm trying to think of a way that you could make the excuse, this thing is as powerful as it is, without completely screwing up the range, or like the gun ranges for every other ship in the game.
I mean, that's the thing. The whole thing with the Ares, right? Yeah, it can carry the big gun, but it's Achilles' heel, if you like. It's supposed to be. It's going to get torn apart by fighters because that is part of like the space naval combat triangle, right? It's in there with bombers. They're slow, and fighters can take them out. But then again, they can take out the big ships. That's right. That's the love triangle you have going on there.
It's going to be focused on let's take out a turret or let's take out a component. And a fleet of these things, or like a wing of Ares, should be able to give a Perseus some hell.
Oh, absolutely.
So I would say the best way to do it would be to reduce the total range of the laser, because again, you have a smaller power plant that you're using this thing with, and say that a charge shot, like a maximum range shot for an Ares, is somewhere in the range of 6 to 7 kilometers.
Yeah, I'd agree with that assessment.
Yeah, and so that gives the Perseus almost a double range advantage, which is fine, because once the Ares closes in, the Perseus, the gun shouldn't be able to track it.
Yeah.
And then it's relying on whatever fighter escort it has to wipe up the Ares.
Exactly.
And if we look at the Inferno, again, ballistics don't typically fizzle out in space, but what you could say is that because it's a bespoke weapon, that size 7 uses like shorter rounds that have less propellant. The idea being they wanted more rounds on the ship, and it's designed to get up close and just unload. So yeah. I would say that, again, the same 6 kilometer range is sufficient for what the Ares was designed to do. You might even say, hey, it only can do 5 to 6 because it's all about DPS and not selected targeting. But the trade-up is that the DPS is so much higher that it has the potential to do some massive damage if it can get in closer. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's exactly it. This is true of all gunnery. Basically, the closer you are, the less damage drop-off you have. It's universal. It's real, and it makes perfect sense. So yeah, ballistics definitely. Bear in mind that it's not the big cannon. So again, going back to my example, I know we don't have this damage model yet, but effectively because it's a Gatling and it's not a cannon, it's not going to have the penetration that the cannon has. And so it's kind of it's going to be like I get closer, but then when I get closer, I can pepper more shells. I can leave a giant. I can draw penises in your hull if I'm close enough, or something like that, right? Because you have continuous fire. It's no less of a threat, but you do have to get closer to do that specific or apply those specific types of damage. Because of course, once you get to ballistic, you're not bound to, I don't know what you would call it, a laser cartridge or whatever. You have all access to all your ammo types. You have AP, your AP, your HE, prox fuse, stuff like that.
Awesome. Oh, that's really all I wanted to touch on today, is just kind of get an intro conversation going. I kind of hope to turn this into a series. And we talked about the Hammerhead, the Perseus. We haven't touched missiles with a 20-foot pole yet. That's going to be a big part of capital gameplay. We still have the Idris, the Kraken, the Javelin, and the other Idris variants to talk about. But yeah, so I think we can leave that for another conversation. Appreciate you coming on, and I think that's it for today, unless you have anything else to add.
No, thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure, and anytime you want me back, I shall be there.